Okay, great. We're really getting there with this application. What we're going to look at now is creating a form for our users to actually add a new pizza to the backend. Now, of course, we've been using Postman to do that. You know, we could do that quite easily, but that's not very user friendly. As a developer, we can just use JSON and stuff like that. But as a user, they like, you know, nice forms that are laid out nicely where they've got instructions and text boxes to type stuff into. So I'm going to do this over the next sort of 3 videos. In this one, we're going to look at actually just creating the form and using something called controlled components. In the next one, we're going to look at dealing with checkboxes because they're a little bit different to just text inputs. And then in the 3rd video, we'll look at actually making the API call and navigating to different pages after we've made that API call to the backend. Okay, so first things first, let's go. We've got our app open, or we've got our code editor open. Feel free to do the same in the Pizzeria app if you've not already. I'm just going to go ahead and make a component called pizza form.js. Now, I've not called this anything specific, such as add pizza or something like that, and we'll come to that in a few videos' time as to why I've given this a generic name of pizza form. So we're going to have to make a component, go ahead and do that. So function pizza form and export default pizza form. Wonderful. Let's just go ahead and return a h1 of pizza form. This is just really good practice, just so that we know where we are. So let's go and make a route for this in our app.js. So import pizza form from /component/pizza form. And then down here in our routes, we'll say route. I'll just close that off so that my autocomplete works a bit nicer, to path. Let's go /pizzas/add. I think that makes sense because we actually want to add a pizza when we're on this page. And the element is going to be our, I haven't put an equal sign in there, that's fine, is going to be our pizza form. Wonderful. Let's do that. I've not got my app started, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. So npm start. I will probably get that warning like I've been getting the last few videos. Oh, no, actually, I've got nothing running on port 3000, so let's just bring this across and sort out my screens. Great, and then we'll just go to /pizzas/add. And brilliant, we do get the pizza form. Wonderful, we can now construct this as we wish. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to just head to my pizza form, and what we want to build here really is kind of a nice easy little form in the middle of our page that will say kind of, add a new pizza and have an input box. We're just going to focus on the name of the pizza for now, and then I'll get you to add everything afterwards in your own time. You kind of do a pause the video, complete this, and then come back to do it, to test it. So first of all, let's go ahead and just start making a form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Bulmer columns to make this a column that's then that's halved, and then I'll offset it by kind of 1/4 to make it center. So let's make a div, and this will have a class name of columns. Even though there's only going to be one column in it, we still need to have that kind of columns wrapper. And then we will make our form element. And this will have a class name, or class names, sorry, of column And the sizing, it should be is half, and then to offset it 1/4, we will do is dash offset dash 1/4. And then we'll also use that box, so that we get that kind of nice outline of just the shadow. We'll use a box for that. Okay, let's save that and just see what's shown up. Okay, we get that box. Okay, there's nothing actually in it just yet, but that's absolutely fine. We're going to put some stuff in it in a second. So a quick just h1 with the class name of title, and in here we'll just say add a new pizza. We will actually come back and change this in a bit, but for now we're just focusing on adding a pizza. So to do this the Bulmer way of adding form inputs, we're going to create a div with the class name of field, and inside this we will then put our label for our our input. So let's say this name, this is name, and then afterwards we then have another div wrapper with class name of control, and inside here we then put our input, if I can spell it correctly anyway. Now it's obviously given us the ending input here. I'm just going to actually delete this and use a self-closer there. So this then also needs a few different things. So you see I've just put that closing on a new line, and we'll put kind of the class name and stuff like that inside, kind of on new lines indented a bit. Just makes it a bit easier to read. So what we'll put in here is a class name of input. And again, this is just so that Bulmer styles things nicely for us. Let's just go and have a double check. Yeah, brilliant. We've got that name and we've got this here. Of course, for accessibility purposes, what we should do is actually give this an ID as well. ID equals, and then pizza name. I think that kind of makes sense. And then we should, inside our label as well, put for, my autocomplete jumping in there. Again, autocomplete handy, but not always. For equals, and then I'm going to say pizza name, just so that we know what the label is actually for. Great. So we've got our input here. Okay, that's enough, right? We can type into it. That's all very well and good. The only problem is, if you like, is that HTML knows what's in this box. The website knows what's in here because we can see it. If I put pepperoni in here, we can see that it has that. The problem is kind of our React application and our programming in the back, kind of slightly behind this in that sort of virtual DOM, if you like, inside React, doesn't know what this is. Now, we're going to need to get hold of all of the data that's in this form in order to then make an API call to our backend. So how are we going to do that? Well, we could do it when we submit this form. We could do it when, that kind of the submit happens, because then we could sort of write a function to grab that data. But there is a slightly better way of doing it. Now, I have trouble kind of explaining to students the benefits of doing it this way, but hopefully you'll kind of understand as we go along, and I'll show you some of the things that we can do with this afterwards. For now, though, just kind of when it comes to the why are we doing this, just kind of go with it, and then I'll explain it later, and I'll show you the advantages of it later. So what we want to do is we want to take whatever is input into this, this box. We want to save that into state, and then we actually want to kind of insert whatever's in state back into this box. Okay, well, let's start with the first bit of that. So what we want to do is we want to write a function that runs every time there's a change inside our input. So inside this component here, inside this pizza form function, I'm going to write another function, and we'll call this handle change, because technically what we're writing here is something called a change handler. So calling it handle change, I think, works right. You might see people call it sort of change handler, but I think handle change is a nicer way of putting this. And okay, so what do we actually want to do inside this function? Well, first of all, we want to check this runs every time our input changes. That's the first thing that we want to do. We then want to grab hold of our, oh, I'm not putting this in a comment, so let's just comment that. Grab hold of whatever our current form data is, so whatever's currently in the form. Want to then set new form data. And I think that's pretty much it. We want to kind of grab whatever's in the box and then set it into state. Okay, well, first of all, let's go ahead and up here, import use state from React. And inside our pizza form, we want to say const, and then we'll destructure our useState. So we'll have our form data and our function of setting our state. So set form data. Set this equal to useState. And then just as a default, let's give it an empty object, because we're going to be kind of we need to get our form data and then send it as a JSON body to our API. Well, a JSON, it's object notation. Might as well have it as an object, right? So inside our change handler here, what we need to do is we need to take the event of whenever this has changed. So inside our input here, let's use the onChange attribute, and this requires a function to run, a callback function. So we will give it our handle change function. So what will be given to this handle change function is the event. So let's just go ahead and see what happens when we change stuff in our input. Let me just move these down a bit so we can kind of see both of, we can kind of see everything that we're doing here. So first of all, let's just go ahead and console.log inside our change handler, our event.target.value. So if we save this now, yeah, we've got some warnings. Don't worry about this. We'll come back to those in a moment. Over in our app, I'm just going to open the console. Oh, and we're getting a little issue here because I'm using for instead of HTML4. It's similar to, that kind of, we can't use class, but we can use class name. Similar thing here. For is a JavaScript keyword. Completely forgot, but we can go back and fix that in a moment. So I'm just going to type something in here. Ah, wonderful. So what we now get is whatever is typed in here, we're console.logging that out. And we know that it's running every single time that we make a change in that name box. Wonderful. So what do we now need to do? Well, what we need to do next is we need to grab whatever is currently in our form data and update that, update the name value inside that form data. So what we can do here, we want to save that in a variable. So we'll say const current data equals. Now, unfortunately, we can't just go ahead and do this, because what that will do is it will kind of say that this here is whatever this variable is, not necessarily what's actually contained within that variable. Now, what we can do is we can say, take that variable and spread out whatever is inside it. So what we want to do here, we want our current data to be an object, and inside it, we want all of the values that are in the form data. So this is a bit of a weird operator that we can use here, but it's called the spread operator. And it's just these 3 dots. And it basically says, take whatever is inside form data and spread that out into a new object. Next, we want to take that event.target.value and kind of put that into our form data. So what we want to do here is we want to say our current form data. So what we want to do is we kind of want to take the name of our input. So down here on my input, I'm going to put a new attribute called name. And I'll set this equal to, well, name, because the name of our input is the name of our pizza. So we'll just call it name. So what we can do up here is we can say, set our current data. We need to use bracket notation here because we're going to be handing it this string of the property name, or the name of the key. So we can say event.target.name. And we're going to set this equal to the event.target.value. Okay, let's see what happens there then. So here I'm just going to console.log our current data. So if I save this now and we go back to here, I'm just going to refresh, or actually I'll just clear the console here, and we type HELLO, you can see that we're actually getting an object with the key of name that includes the key of name and that has the value of hello. Well, fantastic. We can then go ahead and set this into our state. So I'm just going to comment this out so that we don't get too confused here. And we will say set state, or set form data, sorry, set form data to, well, our current data. Let's just go ahead and say console.log whatever our new form data is. So what we've done is we've taken and spread out whatever's currently in our form data. We've updated the name property on that current data that we've got inside here. to whatever the value is inside our input box. And then we've gone ahead and set that form data to whatever that updated kind of object is. And we're just logging that out down here. So I'm just going to refresh to clear everything out. And if I start to say hello, oh, that's a bit odd, isn't it? This is kind of one behind. When I typed H, it was empty. When I typed E, there was only H in our form data. Now, that's just something we need to deal with in React. Setting our state is asynchronous, but it does not return a promise. It's one of those things that we just have to deal with in React, and I'll put some information down below as to why that might be the case. I'm not going to go into it too much now, because what I'd rather you take away from this is just setting our state is non-synchronous. It is not synchronous. So what that means is that you can't access your state immediately after updating it. This should never really be a problem because React deals with that asynchronicity during kind of its renders and stuff like that. It will deal with this for us. It's just an issue if we update the state and then we really immediately need to access it. There are ways around it, but for now, I'm not really going to look into it because it doesn't actually pose that much of an issue to us. So what we could do is if we do just want to console.log out that current data, we could just log it out here. Just like that. So, you know, that's one way of doing it if we wanted to log that out immediately. Okay, so let's just get rid of that console.log. We've pretty much done everything that we need to in here. The only problem that we have is it's being set into state, but this input box here is still just holding on to whatever we've typed into it. It's not actually showing whatever is in state. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to set the value of this to our form data dot name. So we're going to come to this warning in a moment. But basically what we're going to be doing here is we're going to, every time we type, so if I type H, what it's actually doing is it's taking that H that we've given it, it's putting it into state, and then it's giving that H back to our name box here. Well, that just seems like an awfully difficult way of doing it, right? You know, why would, this is the easiest way to touch your nose, but it looks like we're going all the way around here to try and do it. Now, there are some advantages to this. So for example, what if I wanted the name here to be a text box that was always in uppercase letters, but I'm just going to type in lowercase letters here? Well, what we can do is, because we're using this handle change function here, we're setting our kind of current data at the name key to the value here. Well, what we can do is we can actually make changes to our data inside this handle change function. So for example, I could say here to upper case. So if we save this now, and you're just going to have to trust me, I'm not typing in uppercase letters. I'm not holding shift. I've got caps lock turned off. But if I now type in here, you see that we're able to kind of change that data before it goes into state and then before it goes into our text box here. You know, there's lots of different ways that we can kind of, lots of different things that we can do here. For example, maybe we've got a button that just sets state to a default of pepperoni. Is it a pepperoni pizza? Click. Yep, we set state to pepperoni, and then it will appear inside this box here. So this is why we use these control components. It's because we can do things to them. Well, that's one of the reasons anyway, that we can do things to this, so that we can do things to our input data live as the user is using our app. Now, I did say that we would take a look at, first of all, let's have a look at this issue here. We're using 4, but we actually needed HTML4. Yeah, let's go here. So we'll say HTML4. Let's save that and refresh. Brilliant, we've got rid of that error here. Now let's go ahead and just type this. H again. Okay, so we're getting this warning. A component is changing from an uncontrolled input to be controlled. You see, I was saying about controlled inputs and controlled components. It's likely caused by the value changing from undefined to a defined value, which should not happen. Decide either between using a controlled or uncontrolled component for the lifetime of this component. So what's happening there basically is it's saying when our app starts, this value here of formData.name is undefined because our default inside our use state, well, name doesn't exist because it's undefined. So the way that we can kind of get around that is inside this default here is we can, I'm just putting this on a new line, is we can say name, and then we'll just set this to an empty string because we want this to be blank, right? So if we now save this and just refresh to get rid of that warning, and we try and type, it now suppresses that warning because when the app starts, this is no longer undefined in here. It's just an empty string. An advantage of that is if we did actually want to give it a default of something, so we could say name is pepperoni, for example, and we save this now, well, when we refresh our app, it's set to that default if we want it to. Now, this in the add pizza is probably not a big deal. But what happens if we wanted to use this form maybe for editing a pizza? Well, we'd want to pre-populate all of this with whatever's currently in our pizza database. So this is why we use these control components, is because we can kind of pre-populate these things with defaults as well. Now, what I want you to go ahead and do is to add inputs for all of the remaining fields. So what we'll need is the source, we'll need the crust, we will need the toppings, we will also need an image, and we will need the size, which will be a number, and we'll also need the heat rating, which is a number from 1 to 3. Now, you might be thinking, we've also got is vegetarian, and we've also got is vegan. Now, these should probably be checkboxes because they're true or false. What I would like you to do is just leave those for now, and we will come back to them in the next video. So pause the video now and go ahead and try and put in all of the different inputs that we will need for the rest of these fields. Okay, so welcome back. What you should have ended up with is something that looks like this. So we've got underneath our name that we've got here, we've got a source input that runs the handle change function on change, and then has a value of our form data dot source. Same with the crust. Toppings, you know, same. I've just put a little placeholder in here actually, which might be quite handy, that says separate toppings using a comma, because of course we're going to need to make an array to put in our JSON for this. And that's just a little placeholder inside the input box that will kind of say, make sure that you use a comma between all of your toppings. Yep, an image URL, which is just a string. A size, which is actually a type of number, has a type number. And also a heat rating, which is a type of number as well. But don't forget, in order to not get the warning of going from uncontrolled to a controlled form input or component, we will need to add all of those as defaults to our use state. You'll notice that I've actually put empty strings in, like the heat rating and stuff like that. That's just to kind of make it so that they're blank rather than actually showing a number, for example. So if I just save this now, you'll see in our heat rating, it's completely blank. But if I put a default of 0 and save that, you'll see that we then get the default of 0. It's entirely up to you what you do, but I prefer it to be blank rather than 0. It's up to you. Whatever your designer tells you to do, really. So let's just go ahead and test this to make sure that we're getting things printed out to the console. So I'm just going to put Buffalo in here. Fantastic. A crust might be deep pan. You can see my kind of helper here is saying, hey, do you you know, these ones that I've been testing with in the past, do you want this? That doesn't sound like a good pizza, but, you know, it's a pizza nonetheless. So we'll just say sausage and peppers there. We could put an image URL in there. I'm just going to put this in just for testing. A size of 8 and a heat rating of, let's go with 3. Brilliant. We actually get all of our fields printed out to the console. So we know that all of these are going into state as we expect. If you're getting errors, feel free to put those errors in Slack and somebody will get back to you to try and help. But I can almost guarantee that it will, if you're getting errors, it will probably be because you've not updated the value correctly so that these, you know, kind of, it's updating the right field on our form data. Or you've put in the wrong name here. That's almost definitely why it's not working as you would expect. So here we've got a name of name. In here we've got the name of source. In here we've got the name of crust, and we're updating the form data.crust here. But if everything's working as you would expect, fantastic. I'm just going to slowly scroll down this page so that you can go ahead and just double check everything is as you would expect. Great, so if everything's working as you expect, move on to the next video, and we're going to be looking at adding checkboxes to this form.